So I've moved lathes. The lathe that we were on prior was the one that we're using for doing all the machining. Notice that this tool rest here, that there are no tools in here. I've removed that from it. So we're going to be using the tailstock and the chuck on here, the turret. Okay. Eventually we're going to have our piece look like this. They'll be able to sand it down smooth. And to be able to achieve that, we need to put a hole in here that's also going to accommodate that 3/8 aluminum rod that we're putting in this. So our last step gave us 2 circles that are both concentric. They have the same center. We first chucked it up in here, we squared off that, and then we chucked it in here, we squared off that. So they have the same center and they both have nice square edges on them that we're able to go ahead now and put them into our lathe. So I'm going to open up and I'm going to center this up just like so and tighten it. Okay? So we want to drill into the end of that. Whenever we drill into metal and we have to have accuracy in what we're doing, we start our hole with what's called a centering bit. So a centering bit here, and I'll use number 4 today. The number 4 centering bit is really thick and the tip is very small. It doesn't have any wobble. So when we're starting it up, I don't want to use a center punch on the end of this because 99.9% of the time I will not punch it in what is considered dead center. So we're going to put our centering bit into our tailstock here. And we're going to use a chuck key to tighten it. So that's in, and I'll get this tightened. Okay? Then I'm going to bring this up. So that my tailstock is up to it, and I will lock that. This lever back here is going to allow us to lock this tailstock so it's not going to move. I'm set up to the center there. I'm going to start this hole, but I'm not going to go past the taper. Okay? And with this size bit I actually could, because the hole that I'm going to create later on is larger. But all I'm trying to do is to achieve the same type of thing that a center punch would have achieved before. It's going to be a spot that my bit is not going to move from, so it won't deviate from where that center is. Some of the dust off so I can see what I'm doing here. But you hear the click, right? That's a safety that we cannot start the machine without that being on. Okay? The handle down low here. If I go away from it, it spins away from me at the top of this turret here. And if we're doing that, then it's not spinning against the cutter of the bit. So you have to pull to the left and push down, and that's the direction that we're going in. On the back is where I'm going to feed my bit into the material. Okay, I am going to start to make the cut there and start to push my bit back. So I'm going to wait till it's off, I'm going to turn that up, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten this bit a little bit so that it doesn't push back in my chuck. So what I've created now, I'll loosen my tailstock and I'll move that back away. So what I've created there is a hole that's on center that's going to keep my bit, the next bit that I use to go through this, centered the whole time. Pull back my guard, and now I'm going to loosen up the chuck on here. Put my centering bit back. I need to go to 3/8 eventually, but I'm not going to go to 3/8 yet. I want to have a bit that's going to go into the center of that nicely, into that hole there. So I'm going to go to my next bit is going to be a 3/16. And again, I'm using cobalt. Metal isn't, the bit's not going to get very hot cutting aluminum, but I want to get in the habit of when we're working with metals that we're using a bit that has material made of a higher heat resistance. So now this goes in the chuck. And I'll tighten this. we're going through this material. So I'll bring this back up to my hole again, not touching, but close to. Then I'll lock that in place, my guard down. Now we're gonna go through. If the whole chuck itself starts turning, then it wasn't properly seated into the taper. The chuck has a taper that is received by the tailstock, and that's what keeps it from spinning. So if the whole chuck spins, that's the issue there, and let me know. I'll come over and help you with that. I'll go in a little ways, then I'll back out. Just try to help clear some of the chips that are inside there. The flute on our drill bits, which is the spiraled groove there, is what's to help evacuate the material. Kind of the opposite of a drill, right? In a drill, we're turning the bit to cut through the material. With the lathe, we're turning the material and keeping the bit stationary. So it's just the reverse of the same thing. Bring that back, turn it off. Loosen this up. Bring that back. And now I'm going to change my bits again. So I used 3/16. Now I'm going to take this bit out and I'm going to go to my 3/8. This bit goes back, and by the way, this bit is not hot. I can hold the tip of that there. From cutting aluminum, it did not heat it up. And I'm going to direct it to 3/8 of an inch. Bring it up next to it again, lock it. You can see my chips are evacuating pretty well by themselves, so I'm not even backing my bit out. Through. Turn it off. Bring this back out. Take the bit out and return it back to the bit box. So now you can see that we have a 3/8 hole that goes all the way through this. We're going to set it up just how this is set up here. The rod that we're using, I went ahead and I bought some reverse thread, or they call it left-hand thread rod. So it's righty-loosey, lefty-tighty. It's the opposite of what you think. And the reason is when we work in the lathe here to finish this with some sandpaper and files, we are going to be tightening that nut on there rather than loosening it as we're in contact with it. If we had a standard threaded rod on here, that wouldn't be the case. It would be loosening up as we're trying to get this to the condition that we want it to be in. So that goes on front there. That gets tightened up to it. I'll set that here. And now, before we leave the station, I want to clear up all the chips that we have on here. So next to the vertical mill is a vacuum. having a machine shop and a wood shop in the same vicinity means that we have to clean things up a little more often than maybe we normally would. So that is getting our hole in here centered, and now we're going to go over and clean this thing up.